Hello everyone. In this video we're going to be talking about sum and difference formulas. So that's the sine of a plus b, a minus b, cosine of a plus b, a minus b. So the first thing is that we're going to be using the Pythagorean theorem a lot today. So I just wanted to go over the Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And then we're also going to be using sine equals opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. And that can only be done if you really understand what the opposite side is, what the hypotenuse is, what the adjacent is, and things like that. So let's look at these diagrams over here, and I just want to talk about the two different scenarios you can have. So let's say we're working with this angle right here. We'll call this one theta, okay? If we're working with this angle over here, the opposite side is going to be, if you put your finger on the angle, the opposite side is going to be the one you're not touching. So I'm touching these two sides. I'm not touching this side. This is my opposite side. Okay, that's my opposite side in this scenario. And let me use a different color. There we go. Okay, so that's my opposite side. The hypotenuse is across from the right angle. So if you put your finger on the right angle, the side that you're not touching is the hypotenuse. So there's my opposite, there's my other side, and here is my hypotenuse that I was not touching. Okay, and then the very last one, you should always label this one last. This last one here is your adjacent side. Okay, so then the second scenario is that instead of the angle being here, the angle is up here. We're not going to be working with the right angle. It doesn't actually make sense because the hypotenuse and the opposite side are going to be the same. So let's put our finger on the angle. Okay, the opposite side is the one we're not touching, so that's going to be this side over here. So this is my opposite. The hypotenuse is going to be across from the right angle. So if you put your finger on the right angle, it's going to be the one you're not touching, which is this side over here. And then the very last one you're going to label is the adjacent side. Another way that people like to look at it is the opposite is across. So you can do like this, and that will get you to the opposite side. And the hypotenuse is across from the right angle. So you can do this. It certainly works. So whichever way you like to look and see what's the opposite side, what's the hypotenuse. But the adjacent should always be the last one that you label there. Okay. So let's go ahead and do our first example. And in this first example, we're going to be doing the sine formulas. And the second one, we're going to do the cosine formulas. So let's start with this very first one. Given that tangent of A equals 12 over 15 and sine of B equals 40 over 41. So let's make two different diagrams here. We're going to make one for our tangent scenario and we're going to make one for our sine scenario. So the first one is we have tangent of A equals 12 over 15. Remember that 12, since it's tangent, that's going to be opposite over adjacent. So 12 is my opposite side, 15 is my adjacent side. So let's draw a picture for this. All right, and we're going to label this triangle, and we're just going to label it with angle A right here. Okay, so all that we know is that we have angle A. So here's angle A that we're looking at. And our opposite side is going to be the one we're not touching. So if I put my finger right here, the side that I'm not touching is over here. So this is my opposite side. My hypotenuse is the one that's across from the right angle. So if I put my finger on the right angle, this is going to be my hypotenuse. And then the very last one is going to be my adjacent. So this is my adjacent side over here. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, now that we know our different sides that we have labeled, we can go ahead and start putting our values here. So we know that the opposite side is 12, so we know that this is 12. We also know that our adjacent side is 15. So we have that this side is 12, this side is 15, and now we can find the hypotenuse by doing a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So let's do our a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and we'll solve for that other value. Okay, so a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So a squared, these are just the two sides, and c is the hypotenuse. So we're going to do a squared, so let's just do 15 squared, plus b, which is 12, equals c squared. 15 squared plus 12 squared, we're just going to go type that into the program and see what that is equal to. No need to actually spend time figuring that out. Okay, that's going to be 369. So we're going to take the square root of both sides. We're not going to take the minus because we're working with a measurement here. So square root of 369 is going to be And what did I type in wrong here? 15 squared plus 12 squared equals c squared. Okay, I actually wrote this problem down incorrectly. It was 5. It was not 15. So this is 5, okay, which means that this is 5. And this is actually 169. It is not 369. So if you take the square root of 300, or 169 instead, then you'll get 13, which is what you're supposed to get here. Okay, so c is equal to 13. All right, and now we have our 3 different sides, and we can go ahead and start figuring out our sine and cosine values. And the whole reason that we're doing this is because we need sine of A and cosine of A. And both of those are going to be using our hypotenuse. So that's why we had to find our hypotenuse. So now we have our hypotenuse, and we can start plugging in these values. So sine of angle A is the opposite over the hypotenuse. So since sine of A is opposite over hypotenuse, our opposite side is 12, and our hypotenuse is 13 that we now have. Okay, we're also going to find cosine of A because we need both of those for the plus and minus here. So cosine of A is going to be adjacent over hypotenuse. So my adjacent side is 5, my hypotenuse is 13. Okay, now that I have these two values, we can go ahead and move on to our second scenario. So we are going to be using these whenever we get on to the next things. So sine of A is 12 over 13, cosine of A is 5 over 13. All right, let's move on to our second scenario that we're going to be working with here, which is using the sine of B is 40 over 41. Okay, so second scenario over here, we have that sine of B equals 40 over 41, and sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse. So we're going to go ahead and draw our triangle. And let's just say this is angle B. Doesn't really matter where you put it. Okay, my opposite side, that's going to be the one that is across from B. So if I put my finger on B, the side I'm not touching, that's over here. And this is not a very good triangle, but it's okay. Put your finger on the hypotenuse, or on the right angle, or hypotenuse is the one you're not touching. And then the other one is the adjacent. So since we know that the opposite is 40 and the hypotenuse is 41, we're going to go ahead and label this. So the opposite is 40 and the hypotenuse is 41. Okay, now we need to find the adjacent side so that we can calculate our cosine value. We actually already have our sine, so that's good. So let's go find our cosine of B by finding our adjacent side. So we're going to do a squared plus b squared equals c squared. But remember, the a and b are the two legs, and the c is the hypotenuse. So our hypotenuse is 41. So let's do 40 squared plus b squared equals 41 squared. All right, 40 squared, let's just go type that in. We're also going to type in 41 squared. Okay, so this is going to be 1600 plus b squared equals 1681. Okay, here we go. All right, now we can start solving. So we're going to subtract 1600 from both sides. Okay, and we're going to get b squared equals 81. And is this supposed to be 81 here? No, it is not. Yes, it is supposed to be 81 here. Okay, so we're going to get 81. And we're going to take the square root, and we'll get b equals 9. Okay, so the adjacent side is going to be 9 here in this triangle. Now that we have our adjacent, we can go ahead and solve for cosine of b, which is the last value that we need because we need sine of a, cosine b, cosine a, sine b. So let's find cosine of b. That's going to be the adjacent over the hypotenuse. So my adjacent side is 9, my hypotenuse is 41. Okay, now that we have all of our values, we can go ahead and plug into our formula. Okay, and just remember these values that we got. So we need sine of b, cosine of b, oops, there's the value there, and cosine of b here. Okay, so let's go ahead and use these values. We're going to first start out with the sine of a plus b, because that's what our A is asking for. So if we find sine of A plus B, that is going to be sine A cosine B plus cosine A sine B. Okay, so if we're going to go plug these in, sine of A we know is 12 over 13. Cosine B is 9 over 41. Cosine A is 5 over 13. And sine of B is 40 over 41. So we're just going to go type this into a program, see what this is equal to, and we're going to convert it to a fraction. So I'm going to type it into Desmos. You could also type it into a graphing calculator and click Math, Enter. So let's go type these in. We're going to do 12 over 13 times 9 over 41 plus 5 over 13 times 40 over 41. Okay, and we're going to convert this to a fraction. So let's go ahead. Well, you actually don't have to convert it to a fraction, but this is going to be 308 over 533. And this is going to be our sine of A plus B. All right, so this is our first one, our first answer. And the second one is actually pretty simple because the only difference between the sine of A plus B and the sine of A minus B is this is a plus here and this is a minus here. So if I want to find the sine of A minus B, I can just go back to my program and change the plus to a minus, and then that will give us our answer. So let's go change this plus to a minus. And here is our cosine one. And yes, this is our sine of A minus B. So negative 92 over 533. Negative 92 over 533. All right, hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Please stay tuned for the next video where we talk about the cosine formulas. Goodbye.